Welcome to the Inner Athlete podcast, where we discuss all things youth athlete development and youth mentoring. Welcome back to the Inner Athlete podcast. I've got a friendly guest here, an old friend, an old acquaintance, Mr. Ian Miller. Ian, do you just want to give us a quick rundown of who you are, what you do, and we'll get deep into today's topics of youth athlete development.
So basically, S&C coach, have been in the industry now for 9 years. Went to uni up in Ballarat once I realised wasn't going to make it as an athlete. Stumbled into S&C and just sort of fell in love with sort of working with athletes and training people and that sort of thing, and have sort of manoeuvred my way through jobs in here and overseas in the industry, and now landed a gig for the last 5 years at Brighton Grammar School.
Yeah, and that's where we've initially met as well.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to go back to that because you mentioned something really interesting when you got the head role there, and you mentioned something there's like two philosophies that you had, and I think you kind of continue on with that. It was like, you're training for performance or training, for the sport specifically, but you're training for life. Can you kind of elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, for sure. So when the school employed me, they made it pretty clear. So being a boys only school, they do a lot of work in positive masculinity and well-being in that space, and they made it really clear that it wasn't, well, they wanted the S&C work to not only be for the athletes at the school, but for the every boy. So what we sort of came up with was, something which is out there a bit in the literature and that sort of thing as well, but basically active for life. So what that means to us is basically, can we make sure that when the boys leave school, they've got the skills to maintain a fit and healthy lifestyle? Can they walk into any gym and know what they're doing, and be able to put together a program or create a session and perform it and execute it safely, and get the most out of it. And then obviously the train to compete, we wanted to make sure that our students and our athletes, they had the skills to be physically ready to take, or to go to that next level when they get to that next program. Didn't want them to be starting again or anything like that. So that's sort of our philosophy and how we do things.
Yeah, because I basically stole it.
Yeah.
And we kind of use that, and because we work with a lot of high school kids here, and then obviously some of them will move on to a late program, some of them will just finish high school and maybe go to uni and do their own thing as well. So it's kind of like setting them up for the next stage of their life. So whether it is if they're just playing club level and they decide to go to uni or something like that, at least they'll have the skills in order to properly construct a program, perform it safely, and get the desired adaptations out of it, but also they'll be able to do it in a way where they're not going to burn themselves out at the same time as well. But then the performance perspective, obviously, you train them to perform to a certain level, whether it's competition or even if they're going to the elite pathways, you actually set them up for when they achieve or get into those programs, because there's going to be a certain expectation that they have, certain skills or down pat, or at least been exposed to those skills at the earliest stages, so then they can get up to speed relatively quickly.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and now you've been there for 5 years now. Obviously, there was a disruption with COVID. How did you see the development of the year 7s to with a year 12 now? So how have you seen that development from the year 7s all the way up to year 12, and how do you kind of like navigate that that time when they're in year 8 and year 9, or whatever years it was?
It's been really interesting, because being a school and being teenagers, they come in and out of your program. So that's probably something where it's been a growth for me as a coach. Sort of came in based off my time in the UK and England, had sort of a philosophy and idea of what I wanted the program to look like, and so we've basically got a syllabus and a curriculum which I've developed over time, and sort of had the program basically planned out from year 7 through to year 12 and what that looks like. And probably initially it was very structured, and they had to hit all their phases and key competencies and that sort of thing. But what becomes pretty clear is you'll get a year 7 kid that's super keen for 8 weeks, and then all of a sudden winter hits, or he gets a new interest and he disappears for 6 to 9 months, and then he rolls back in again at year 8. And so it's been an interesting process, that, like, because probably initially when I first came in, I'm like, oh, it's mucking up our progressions. But what sort of I've learnt to do is be adaptable with it, and understand that when they do come back, or say when they do get to back end of year 8, year 9, and they're going through peak height velocity, and all of a sudden they've forgotten how to squat, it's not the end of the world. We've just got to create an environment where, for lack of a better term, they can fail safely, and we just are there to help and navigate them through, because there's a few kids that haven't missed, and when they come in, they pretty much come in every 1 to 2 times a week for 5 years, and you can see how good their patterns are now, the strength and size and that sort of stuff they've put in. But then there's also the kids where they've been in and out a bit, and which that's okay too, but it's also been able to be patient, and when they come back in after being out for a while, just trying to re-engage them, and just basically navigate them through. And what we've found is that being patient, and not sort of fretting if they do go backwards a little bit, because it's natural. Just to stick the course, and then when it gets to that year 11 and 12 position, what I've found is that their patterns have sort of come good again, if that makes sense. And so it's just been that ability to sort of stay patient with it.
Yeah, because it's quite interesting, because we have members here that will be consistent, but then we have other members here that will train for 6 months straight, but then they'll back off for whatever. Then they'll come back again as well. And it's I guess you have to go through that relearning phase, but that relearning phase is a lot shorter. Then you can build upon that as well. In terms of the actual development, obviously those who are consistent over the 5-year period, they're going to get better outcomes. It's just kind of natural. But even then, for those who aren't as consistent, they're still getting outcomes as well. So you're not trying to force them to be like the kids that come in consistently. Ideally, that's what we want as coaches. We want everyone to be the best and take advantage of the program and just be bought in the whole process. But in the reality of working with other people, the reality is that not everyone's going to be as consistent as you hope for. You might have 10-20% of your kids doing that. That's great. Then everyone else is just not piss farting, but they'll kind of have their stints where they're doing really well, and some of them will back off for whatever it may be as well.
I think it's a really interesting point, because the thing I found probably initially almost went too hard with trying to get them to come in and be consistent, because I don't think there's a magic answer, but what I've found with the kids I've had the best outcomes, the really simple reason why they've had really good outcomes is because they've been consistent. But the flip side is they've also got to figure it out themselves. I've found the more I've said, you've got to come here instead of going to your local gym, or, and sort of pushed them on that. Being boys, they've gone, nah, I'm going to go and try and do it my way. And having that confidence to almost let them go and trust your process, and then when they do come back, they go, oh, hang on, these guys actually did know what they were talking about. And that's probably been a bit of a shift to sort of help with our outcomes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so you got to get them going through the Dunning-Kruger.
Yeah.
Get them hit the peak of Mount Stoop, and then unfortunately it's a sharp fall from there. But that's good. I think that's just showing that maturity in their actual development. It's like, hey, this person's actually here to help me. They know what they're doing. They've done it for years. They're doing it with everyone else around me. Then their awareness becomes a lot more heightened in terms of, if I'm want to get more out of the gym, I've got to know someone who knows how to get more out of the gym, essentially. So then as a result, they're going to come to you, then their learning of whatever the movements are, it's going to be a lot faster. But then they're going to be like, oh, I probably should have stuck here, or they're going to question themselves. But that's healthy. I think some boys will have to learn the hard way, where some athletes, or some boys will, in this case, will just naturally be like, yep, whatever you tell me, I'll do it, because they've just kind of had that whole mentality growing up. So they might have played sport the whole time, and the coaches told them what to do the whole time. It's like, yep, I'll do it. And then as a result, they just get to where they need to be, and they're just happy to being told what to do throughout the whole process. Obviously, you're balancing those personalities as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, with Brighton Grammar, so what are the sports are they really known for? What are the kind of their key sports?
Yeah, so from a summer point of view, definitely rowing would be our number one. Invest quite heavily in probably cricket as well, and tennis. They're probably the main three summer sports. From a winter sport point of view, definitely AFL. Rugby has become really popular at the school.
That's good.
We've invested quite heavily in some scholarship kids and that sort of thing there. And then probably soccer as well. They'd probably be the big six, but I think there's 18 sports that we cover at the school. So there is a wide sort of range of options for the boys.
That's good. It's quite diverse based on the individual or team sports. Now, how do you go about, I know a school term, it can be quite messy in terms of balancing workloads. They've got exams, assessments, they've got their own lives to live. They've probably got extracurricular, especially being a private school. How do you go about helping them best navigate that in order to try and continually drive adaptations in the performance perspective? How do you go about managing that with the coaches and the athletes themselves?
Yeah, so we as a program, we're heavily invested with our PE program. So our PE really value the S&C and what we do. So we get the opportunity in Year 9 in particular to sort of do a 4-week block with the students where we go through some strength programming, we go through a speed and power session, an injury prevention session, and we sort of speak about training loads, and because a lot of them still at that stage are playing 2 games of sport in a weekend, and like what that means for your body and how you recover and that sort of thing. So we do sort of put a lot of time in trying to educate them themselves. We've got some tools set up around the gym, so there's like a weekly planner that they can grab. So really common that we've had boys from Sandy Dragons and that sort of thing come in and go, all right, I want to get fit for this pre-season. So we'll try and sit down with them, get them to look at their week and understand that they don't need to be doing 6 running sessions. All right, if you get these done here, prioritise some strength here, make sure you get some recovery days. I remember there was one kid that came and showed me his weekly schedule, and he had something like 26 hours of structured activity, and like it was like
Jesus,
sort of nearly fell off my chair. So we try to, as best we can, sit down with the boys and educate them on sometimes less is more, and thinking about recovery and how to plan their weeks. And then we'll also chat with coaches as well, particularly from like a rowing point of view. Like some of their workloads are really high for a student athlete.
And that's a sport you can easily measure as well.
Yeah. So the biggest success, I guess, as well, is when we've had the engagement from the coaches, and by and large they've been pretty good as well.
And what's been the result of that? Basically just being able to better educate the athletes and working more in conjunction with the coaches.
Yeah, look, I feel like from referencing our train to compete before, if we're looking at our AFL guys, like I feel the ones that have got drafted or even the ones that have ended up in VFL, like I'm pretty proud that every boy has played senior footy pretty quickly, because I feel like we've set them up with a good understanding of how to train, how to look after their body, and they were able to, as we sort of wanted, excel in that program once they got there. But we've had some good results with teams, obviously, like winning a premiership in footy. We had a Head of the River 2 years ago. So we've had the team results, which are obviously great, but and great for the school and great for the community. But I feel like we've had some really good results for the students as well.
Yeah, and I think that kind of leads into the next part of, when they do transition to that higher level, at least then they can actually more focus on, or they've developed that skills of better self-managing themselves. So when they do transition, where I guess there's at school there's a lot of support, and then when they go to the professional setting or semi-professional setting, yes, there is a lot of support, but you're left to your own demise to some degree, because technically, mentally, they're still kids. at the end of the day, or teenagers. So they're left to their own demise in that sense. So at least you've kind of set them up in order how to better manage themselves in a professional setting, which you mentioned before. They've been able to play, senior games, relatively quickly.
Yeah, exactly. No, I couldn't agree more. I think you summed that up perfectly.
Yeah. I do what I can with what I got. No, it's really good. And I think that's probably the key thing is that we're creating the recipe for success later on down the track, where I guess in what you said before, you're kind of teaching them how to fail in an environment where they can learn and develop, and they've got that support network around them. Then you're kind of like, they're testing that in their new environment, and if they succeed, that's great. You've done what you've needed to, or they've done what they've needed to in order to be successful in that environment. Then more than likely they're going to have the longevity in the career is going to be far greater. With AFL, I think AFL is 3 years the average career now. 4, yep. So ideally, you want to be playing, 5 or 6. At the end of your third year, that's when you start getting a good paycheck as well. Yeah. So
I mean, that's the thing for me, and it's interesting when you see things that are, we got an athlete drafted. That's fantastic, all right. But have you set them up for success? And that's, I don't know, sometimes maybe that's controversial, I don't know. But I'm pretty big on making sure, it's great they got drafted, but I don't want them out of the system in 3 or 4 years. I want them to make the most of their opportunity. And obviously part of that will come down to skill and their competitiveness and all that kind of thing. But if we can set them up physically where they can maximise their opportunity with what they've been given, then I think that's really important.
Yeah, because I guess the NBA is probably the best example of players failing to launch, where you get number 1 to 10 in previous history. They just don't. Their career doesn't really launch. Same thing with the NFL. AFL to some degree, they have their first couple of years, they're okay, they're pretty good. Would you actually consider them a high level draft pick? Probably not if you look back at it at the end of the day. So I think it's coming down to, I think it's more of a lesson for the parents on this one, is that what happens behind the scenes, which will manifest onto what's happening on the field or in the gym, which will manifest in competition, which will obviously manifest later on in terms of increasing your likelihood of getting selected or drafted, or whatever it may be in terms of your sporting career. It's really good. I think, from a sporting perspective, especially from a youth athlete development, how have you, because you've been in the industry for quite a while now, and especially in Melbourne, how have you seen the whole youth athlete development kind of starting to play out now? Because you work in a school setting. We obviously used to work together, and then now I'm working in a private setting. How have you kind of seen the buy-in from school, from Brighton Grammar specifically? Has that actually changed from when it first started to where it is now?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think from Brighton Grammar's point of view, I think it's definitely started to shift. I think maybe at the start it was a nice to have, but now they're sort of really starting to see the value of the program and what it can do to the school. It's probably something, as a person, needs to get better at. And we've sort of done a bit of stuff lately is promoting what we do. It's probably something that doesn't come supernatural to me, but the school has sort of become aware of how important, I guess, the S&C program's been and what we've done with our sort of rowing and football teams and having that success and how integral we've been as part of that. So they've sort of started, I think, in probably the last 18 months to 24 months, really understand how important that is. And, they've invested in a second full-time coach for us in the last 6 months. So I think they are starting to see that importance. And like a lot of these schools, once more schools start investing in it, they don't want to be left behind. So I think at the moment from an APS point of view, we're definitely, I think, a leader. But I know other schools are starting to invest more and put more money into it, which will only be a good thing for other coaches and that sort of stuff out there, as hopefully it'll create more opportunities.
Keep an eye out on the second instalment of our conversation. If you want to stay updated on the latest episodes, make sure to subscribe to Inner Athlete on both YouTube and Spotify.